welcome you tonight. Invite people in to unpack their bags with Dr. Danita. Please do remember, I say this every single week, these lives are meant to provide education for you. The topic is, this series is on racial trauma and how it affects our mental health. We give tips at the end for moving forward in whatever topic it is that we share, how we move forward from here. And so we just do want you to know that these lives do not substitute professional counseling. And if you feel that you are struggling in any way in the area of your emotions and mental health, we do want you to reach out for professional assistance. And so we're going to get started on this evening. I am so excited to have both of my guests. I usually choose people who either have who are in the profession or have background in the area in which the topic is for that evening, or I choose people that have an amazing passion for this specific topic. And so tonight we're talking about Protect Black Women. And before I go into some of the things that I want to share on tonight, I want Valerie Mason Chase to introduce herself, and I will also have Latoya Brigman to introduce herself.
Well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. I appreciate the invitation, and I consider it an honor to be here to share on this evening. As Dr. Danita said, my name is Valerie Mason Chase. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother. I am a recently retired RN after a 42-year career in healthcare. I am now transitioning from nursing to counseling. I felt called to counseling about 5 years ago, and the last couple of years I've been at Cairn University pursuing a master's in counseling, and I am in my internship year, which I am currently under the supervision of Dr. Danita Thompson at Mending Hearts Family Counseling. That's who I am.
All right, thank you so much. And I know that you have a passion for this topic.
Absolutely.
Based on some of the things that we have communicated about.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, I just want to thank Dr. Danita for having me on the show. Also, my name is Latoya Brigman. So where do I start? I worked for, I don't want to, I guess, put the names out, but I worked for a few Forbes 500 companies where I worked for maybe over 8 to 10 years in telecommunications. I recently actually no longer work for the company, and I actually work for Dr. Danita at the moment right now. Again, similar to Miss Valerie, I am also a wife, I'm a mom. I'm also an elder in our ministry at Mending Hearts Kingdom Church. And in this topic, I'm just very passionate about this topic and the protection of Black women. So I'm just excited to be here and dig in for tonight.
All right, well, thank you, ladies. We are going to get started. If you are just coming in, please do like and share. This topic is absolutely necessary for all of your family and friends to partake in and to be able to view. And we just want to make a connection tonight and see what some of you think about some of the topic themes that we're going to cover on tonight. And so this topic of Protect Black Women, over the last, I'll say 5, 6, 7 months, the outcry has gotten louder, I would say. And so some of the things that we have heard is that Black men are targeted and Black men are the most targeted, but Black women are the least protected. Black women are feeling very disrespected. We're feeling very disregarded. As a collective, we feel objectified. We deal with the fatphobia and fatphobia and colorism and just so many things that, as collectively as Black women, that we are feeling, but the feeling has been for years, like years, before I was even born. I was looking at a quote that Malcolm X stated, and he said, this was in 1962, y'all. Almost 60 years ago, I'm looking at this, and he says, the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is the Black woman. 60 years ago, that was stated by Malcolm X, and so as a collective, he was saying that there was a need and there was a concern about that, the oppression that Black women were experiencing. And so here we are in 2020, almost 2021, and it feels like we're in the same place. So when we think about this topic of protect Black women, what does it mean, and what are some of the ways in which it plays out?
Well, when I think about protecting Black women, I think there are many layers involved in that. We have to look at it from the perspective of protecting our person from a physical perspective. We have to look at protecting us from a legal perspective within the criminal justice system. Look at protecting us in healthcare, because as we know that there are healthcare disparities. So there are many different layers. Also, from a spiritual perspective, are we even protected in the church? Where are we protected? So when I think about protecting Black women, it is from a very holistic perspective, looking at all of who we are, every conceivable place where we may be, and providing protection for us on all levels.
No, I thought that was really good. You hit like the nail right on the head. I was going to say, not to kind of reiterate what Ms. Valerie said, but when I looked up the word protect, right, and there were so many words that were synonymous to it, right? Yeah. So we had the words of like covered, preserved, cherished. We had things like defended, cared for. So when we really think about the word protect, and when we think about, those synonyms that go with that, I wouldn't even put those words and the Black woman in the same sentence. So just how you were saying when you were mentioning things like healthcare, in a corporate world and all these things, we're not preserved, we're not cherished, we're not respected, we're in all those things. So when somebody say like, what does that mean? When you think of the word, when we're saying like we're unprotected, we're saying that we're not cherished, we're not secured, we're not cared for, we're not defended for, like those things that we feel like we always have to stand up for ourselves. So to kind of piggyback off of what Ms. Valerie said, those words that I stated before, I wouldn't even put them in the same sentence as a Black woman.
Yeah. And some of the more subtle ways, or I don't even know if it's really, if it would really be considered subtle, but sometimes as it relates to our size, our height, when we say that we're not protected, we're the brunt of jokes. If we're too large, we're the brunt of jokes. If we're not the average height, we're the brunt of jokes. If our color is darker than what society
and don't even start talking about hair, because that's a whole nother. We could spend an hour on just that, because that's another area where we have to look at in terms of Black women. And some of it is internalized, and some of it we have been conditioned to think less of ourselves and our hair in its natural state.
Yeah, there's a standard of what the beauty club should look like.
Yes.
And if we fall outside of the parameters of the standard, then sometimes when you say internalize, we look at others, and we in our own group, we can single out people and have negative things to say about them, and not even thinking about it, but it's because we have taken on the same mindset because it's just so subtle.
Yeah, and I agree 100% because there was a movie that came out, I don't even remember the year, but Chris Rock did a movie called Good Hair.
Yes, I
And
agree.
it really talked about the hair industry and what, even in our own community, you know, what damage relaxers do and those type of things. But we're, like you said, conditioned to think that, oh, if my hair is long and straight, I'll be accepted. But if my hair is what they call nappy or not good hair, then we're looked at as like, oh, well, we're not supposed to be a part of the group. So yeah, this topic can go on for
Yes,
definitely
I agree.
okay.
Yes. I think it's something we've all experienced on some level as Black women.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why do you think that this topic is just resurfacing? You know, why is the cry becoming so much louder now? Why has this topic been so foreign to discussion?
I think a lot of it has to do with millennials, because they are looking at it differently than women in my generation.
We accepted a lot.
We did. We accepted a lot. We accepted the status quo. And the millennials, they're not having that. And so I think a lot of it has to do with them and the outcry and just the overall climate that has existed in our country, specifically under our current administration, has had a lot to do with it. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it.
I think that definitely is good. I also think that sometimes it goes unnoticed because of our dual roles, right? We're Black, but we're also women. But I feel like as the Black part, right? I feel like we get marginalized in the whole Black Lives Matter movement.
Yes.
Where we're more focused on the needs of the Black community, and we're forgotten about like our own individual things that we need as Black women, right? But then when we go over to the women's rights, we're fighting for women's rights, but then again, that's the universal rights of women. That's not the need of the Black woman. So I feel like we're in this middle ground almost, because it's like, okay, well, I want to be a part of the Black Lives Movement, but I want the movement for advancement of Black people.
Yes.
But then I feel guilty of like, if I just tell them what my needs are as a Black woman, is that, you know, am I taking away from the Black Lives Matter, you know what I mean? Or, so I feel like it's just the fact that we're just caught in the middle, and sometimes I feel like we have to choose, but I feel like we were born as Black women. We weren't born as Black first and women second. We shouldn't have to choose or decide which one to go for. So that's why I feel like a lot of the idea of Black women maybe doesn't come up too often, because it's kind of lost in the middle ground of both areas.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, because like Victoria said, we have to sometimes put in a position of having to choose upon which are we going to focus, our Blackness or the fact that we are women. And I choose not to have to decide. I remember there was a class I was taking recently, and I was taking recently, and we had these little cards that identified different aspects of who we are: our gender, our race, our profession, whether we are Christian or not, and we had to lay them out in order of importance, what we are prioritizing. Well, for me, I put the card that identified me as a Christian, as a woman, and as an African American all as one, because I can't separate that.
Right.
Because they all connect, my gender as well as my ethnicity. So I don't think that we should be put in a position of having to choose which one are we going to focus on, because all of it defines all of who we are.
I think the other thing is that we spend a lot of time protecting others. And I think we put ourselves on the back burner. It's just instinctively, it's our nature to put ourselves on the back burner. And so we protect our men, we protect our children. We're just in that protective mode. And then no one thinks about necessarily protecting us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we fall into giving off the aura of not needing protection.
Yes, and I'm gonna get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so just thinking about this historically, when and talking about us being unprotected and the various ways in which we were portrayed throughout history. So during slavery time, we were portrayed as being over-sexualized and promiscuous, and this enabled the master to have his way, and it gave him justification for rape, right? And then post-slavery, we were viewed as overweight, big mamas, or you know the mama, yeah, the mammy, yeah. And this was to help lessen the threat in white relationships.
Yeah.
And then in the 1920s, we get portrayed as angry black women. And so, you know, there's caricatures of us, and this was to help portray black men as being, you know, lazy or shiftless, and, you know, just to denigrate them, right? And so today, now we're viewed as these strong black women, the strong black woman. And so although that's not considered, you know, the connotation isn't so negative, and it is, you know, positive to be portrayed as strong, it still comes with negative implications for us. So how does that impact us as women to be now considered the strong black woman?
Well, I think there is the myth of the strong black woman, and then there is the reality of the strong black woman. And the myth, which some people have in their head, and if you can picture, there is a black woman who, after having given birth to 5 or 6 children, she's got a body like Halle Berry. She can sing like Beyonce. She has a child on each leg and one in her arm while she's preparing a gourmet meal for her husband, all while also preparing a legal brief. And she's thinking about how she's going to sex her man up when he gets home. That's the myth. But the reality of the strong black woman is we have single black women raising their children, working 1, maybe 2, sometimes 3 jobs, praying that their child or children will be safe until they can make it home from work.
Right.
We may have a married black woman who has either intellectual or financial capabilities that surpass that of her husband, but she has to navigate that in such a way as to not demean or degrade or disrespect her husband. So there is that myth, and then there is the reality. Yeah.
I would say for me, the idea of the strong black woman, so like you mentioned, you know, like taking it back to slavery, right? You had the, I just feel like it really, really started there, because you think about it, if a black man, how you were saying with, you know, with the master, they would like, you know, have their way with the black woman, right? The black man would have to watch that happen. And they would have to actually teach their sons that, you know, pretty much turn your back to that, right? Meanwhile, the woman had to go handle what needed to be handled, come back, and then God forbid if that man did get a rage up in them, she immediately had to step in, and she had to be like, please don't do this, because she knew that was going to either end up in him being sold, him being like shot or killed or whatever have you, right? So she always had to stand up. So really at that time, the black man could never really show his protection, because that would end up tragic, right? So I look at it now, you know, that was passed down from that time to this time. And even though we may not be where they were at that point, those traditions or things were always passed down to, you know, the black man always needs our protection, so we always has to stand in front. Even though it's taught, that they're supposed to be our covering, we're their protection. So when I think about even being a young girl, like how you were saying, seeing my mom, doing it all, and even though there was my father in the house, the woman did it all. So I just think like the whole idea of the strong black woman has really become, even though it's a compliment, it really has become toxic.
Yeah.
Because we mentally have this idea that we're supposed to do all this and we're supposed to protect. And it really, that idea of the strong black woman really takes away the responsibility of what other people should be doing also.
Yeah.
So I really just think that people use that strong black woman as pretty much as a crutch and as taking away from their responsibility of what they have to do. So as much as I love to hear, the strong black woman being that strong black woman, that could be a very toxic statement if you're not handling it appropriately.
Yeah. I think about there's a lot of ways in which we have to protect, or we feel that we should protect our black men. And I was just thinking about how this Protect Black Women really rose this summer over the Megan Thee Stallion. I would say Megan, I'm not into rappers or whatever, but at any rate, I was listening to a podcast of, there's a lot of, story out there about what happened. But one of the things that I was listening to, they were sharing about how in that split second when she was shot, and there's copters flying in the air, she had to make the decision, like, am I going to protect this black man? Because if I say that he shot me right now, what is going to happen to this black man? So in so many instances, we can go on and on and on. Even as it relates to us in the home with our black men, there are so many instances where we are in the position of, how do I protect? They're coming in from long, hard days of working for the man. And we've had long, hard days, but we still feel like, most of us, I should say collectively, I can't say what every woman feels, but for me, so we still feel like we need to take care of and protect and we tell the kids, Daddy just got home, that kind of thing, and don't make too much noise, or it's just so many instances that.
Yeah, and to piggyback off what you said, Megan Thee Stallion, that's definitely a big story that came out because it took her a long time before she even said anything about it. There was just stories flourishing and things like that. But like you said, immediately when she shared her story, it became like a circus. Like they talked about her, they laughed about her. Yeah. But the crazy thing about it that I always realized that, regardless of whatever your sentiments about her as an artist is, and if you don't like her music, one thing you can't deny is she had like 2 or 3 Billboard top 10 hits with Beyonce, with Cardi B, and the list goes on, right? And the type of numbers that she was bringing in would be comparable to her white counterparts at the time, right? So I would just look at it as like, if that was one of her white counterparts that was an artist, would she have gotten the same treatment? Would it have been swept under the rug? Will they have been laughed at? Would they have made memes about her? But because it was her, it was more of like, people were skeptic about it. They asked questions, and again, that goes back to the unprotected part, because instead of saying, I'm sorry that happened to you, the question was, is she telling the truth? Like, why would he do that? But at the end of the day, if she's showing you receipt that she was shot, why do I have to share with you, all the other things? This is what happened. Why don't you believe it? So I believe that that's another issue of like, with Black women, is I feel like we always have to over-explain ourselves to get the simple humanity things that other people just get naturally.
Yeah. And that over-explaining sometimes can get very exhausting.
Frustrating.
And very frustrating. Because like you said, we always ask ourselves the question, would this have happened to me? Would I have had that same experience where I'm not a black woman? If I were a white woman, would I have to explain all this? Would I have to give all the backstory? So there's always that question. And I don't know if white women have to ask themselves that same question, but we always are wondering, is it happening to me because I'm black? Is it happening to me because I'm a woman?
Yeah, it's the intersectionality of race and gender. And so, as Black people in general, we have to consistently, monitor and all that we have to do. And last week we talked about code switching, and but then there's the other level for us, as women. But getting back to Meg Thee Stallion, I think she was the one that that posted, I can't be your protector and be your target as well. Yeah. And so that brings me to the unfortunate reality, because all of these lives have been in reference to racism and what we experience at the hands of the dominant race, right? But for us as Black women, we also experience being unprotected at the hands of our own Black men. And that's the sad part for me, that's the sad part of this. And so, what are your thoughts about that? Why do we as Black women also suffer at the hand of our own Black men?
I think primarily because we're an easy target. Because we are the ones who are the closest to them. And when they have been marginalized, when they have been disrespected out in the world, especially in an environment where they feel totally emasculated or incapable or fearful of speaking out, and when they come home and they have all this pent up inside of them, but it has to come out. Where is it going to come out? Who's going to be the target? The Black woman is there in the home with them. So I think we are the ones who experience it the most because we are an easy available target for them. They have easy access to it. And so often when that occurs, we don't speak up about it. We cover for them. We don't want anybody to know that this is going on. So rather than the male being the protector of the woman, the children in the home, now we have again the Black woman being the protector and covering up.
Yeah, and I think also it goes back to that post-traumatic slave syndrome where we had to keep our mouths closed when we were being raped. We had to keep our mouths closed when the master was beating even our men. And so we were just conditioned to keep our mouths closed, and that has intergenerationally, transgenerationally passed down. Just keep your mouth closed.
Yeah.
Suck it up and be strong.
Yes. Don't say anything. How many times have we heard? I know in my generation. Tell everybody what happens in this house. So we were conditioned that whatever goes on in here has to stay in here, even if it's toxic, if it's abusive, whatever it is. If it's incest, it stays in the house.
There's a comment here. It says, I personally struggle with that title, strong woman. It's not a rite of passage. Most women really don't want to be strong.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think so many of us we fulfill that role, not because we want to, but because we have to. Because sometimes we are put in a position where if we don't do it, it won't get done.
Right.
So we don't always want to do it, but sometimes we don't have any other choice.
No, I agree with that too, and even back to what you were saying about the question about us taking the brunt of the hostility. Like Ms. Valerie was saying, we're always there to clean up the wounds, and we're always there in those senses. But I really feel like we're the ones that really we get the fact that, let's just say if I'm abused, right? We suffer in silence because if I'm abused and I call the cops, so the first thing in my mind is like, if the cops come,
Yeah,
what's going to happen to this black man?
absolutely.
You know, and those are the first things that go to our house. And even though you may be, you know, there's a lot of women that, like you said, that have been abused by black men or whatever the case may be, we're willing to be like, we're okay and we're good because I don't want you to have to deal with those simple things. So even to what the person was saying, like you don't want to be the strong. The comment is they don't want to be the strong woman. But I just feel like there's just so many times where we're just put in those positions where we just have to choose those, and sometimes our mental space and where we are sometimes falls low man on the totem pole to our men or to our children and things like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't end with our husbands or the man in our life, because once we have a son, now we have to have the conversation with that son. Because now we have to, we want our sons to be protected. I have 2 sons, and I can remember very distinctly having that conversations with them about how you conduct yourself if you ever come in contact with law enforcement, even if you haven't done anything wrong. And one of my sons, one is more vocal than the other. And he would always say, but Ma, you know, if I haven't done anything, why can't I do this? I said, listen, baby, it doesn't matter. I just want you to come home alive. I want you to come home.
Right.
So it doesn't end with the adult men in our lives, because now we have to protect our black sons.
And I'm thinking after we do all of this in attempting to, and successfully, protecting our black men, protecting our husbands, protecting our sons, what are your thoughts about, after all of this protection, our black men then just gravitate to white women? So, and we've spent so much time protecting them. So,
Okay, so in all seriousness, like I'm really okay with interracial dating. Like I just want to start with that. Like if you find somebody that's of another color, I'm not going to be the one that's like, oh, you shouldn't have married that person. If it's done in a way where it's like, if it was real love or whatever the case may be. Okay, so the issue that I have is that I do feel like there's a lot of men, once they reach a certain success, white women goes along with that level of success. So it's just like, once I've reached this, like in college or here, I'm okay with having the black woman, right? To get me through my struggle period, to pull me through, to be that, that right hand person, right? But then, like, let's just use an example, because we see it a lot. But then I sign my NBA deal, or I sign my NFL deal, or I become that successful lawyer, or whatever the case may be. Success immediately goes to, and I'm not saying this for all black men, but I'm just saying that we normally see it a lot, that they tend to gravitate towards white women, right? And I do recognize that that is a historical thing because, back in the slave times, and even in the early 60s, white women were untouchable. We think about what happened to Emmett Till. All he did was whistle at a white woman,
right.
and they went into his house, took him out, tortured, beat this young kid until his mother couldn't even recognize him, right? Yeah. So you think about it now, being that the history of white women with black men is they're untouchable, that goes along with my success. So that's where I have the issue with that. And then the other thing that I have the issue with is if you have a preference, if your preference is white or whatever it is, just because your preference is white does not mean that you have to degrade the black woman.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that I don't like, because it'll immediately be where you'll have the black man say, yeah, I chose a white woman. Oh, well, the reason why I have a white woman, without even asking, you know how the meme says, somebody says something, they'll say, nobody, ask them, and they'll just immediately go to saying, and the reason why I don't is because black women have an attitude. Black woman is this, black woman is that, but the same attitude and the same things and attributes that you're saying you didn't like is what you love in your grandmother. or what you loved in your mother.
Wow.
And what held you through to get you to those. So when you're up accepting your award and you're like, if it wasn't for my grandmother, that old black woman, or my mother, that old black woman, but then you degrade those that are on your level, that's your age, and you say, but you're not enough for me, you're not sufficient, I'll take the white woman that's next to you. So those are the things that I have the struggle with, is when you're putting down those, the black women that held you through. Right, but then again, when you think about it, a lot of them, they end up in bad situations. Then it's like, oh, but then you want to come back and you want the black woman to, again, heal those wounds and get you, so those are the issues that I have with it.
Well, I have to admit that I used to have very, very strong opinions in opposition of interracial dating. And I'm ashamed to say it now, but I will admit that I used to even talk to my sons about not dating white women. What changed my attitude is when my younger son, he was in college, undergraduate, and he was dating a white female. And he told his father, he told his sister, and he told his brother, but he didn't tell me. It was a long time before he was able to talk to me about it. And when he finally did, it's because he said, Mom, I know how you feel about it. And that made me have to really take a long, hard look at myself and ask myself, well, why, Valerie, do you feel so strongly about that?
Right.
And it helped me to change my perspective. I used to feel I was very, very much against it. And it was almost as if I took it as a personal affront when I would see something like that. But I had to start looking at it differently. And I agree with what Latoya said. I don't have a problem now with interracial dating, but it just unnerves me and angers me when, along with that preference, comes the degrading of Black women. That really, really annoys me. If you prefer, whatever you prefer is your business, because whomever you're going to be with is who you're going to be with. But it's not necessary to degrade the Black female in order to have that preference.
Right. I don't think my issue with interracial dating and marriage was necessarily because Black men were fleeing the culture. For me and my sons, it was more of, marriage is hard enough when you're with someone that you can relate to. Culturally speaking, it just makes it so much more challenging to navigate marriage in that way and relationships, that way. And in my mind, okay, we talk about unity or whatever, and people coming together, white and Black coming together, but it really hasn't unified us by us. But interracial marriage has not really done anything for us as a nation.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And to piggyback on what you said about how it's difficult in an interracial relationship, I think it is a bit less difficult now than it was when I was younger. I think that younger generations now are more open to interracial dating, and not just among Black and white, with Latino, Asian. They're much more open to it. Now I have, my thoughts now are about my biracial grandchild. And how is she going to fit in? Is she going to be accepted? Because I have read about and I've known biracial children who struggle with that. They struggle with their identity because they feel that they are not Black enough for the Black community, but they're too Black for the white community. So now my thoughts are, where is my granddaughter going to fit in? So I think that's more of a struggle nowadays than the interracial marriage itself.
Yeah. And I think also with interracial marriage becoming, more prevalent now, in my opinion, it just heightens the fear of the dominant culture. It heightens the fear of those who are in charge. And then institutional systems, systemic racism, they're just looking, to see what else they can put on paper to ensure that they are not erased
Yeah.
out of,
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think it was Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, I think, who said that that is part of the white fear.
Yes.
That with interracial marriage, that eventually the white man will cease to exist almost. Because our genes are so strong, so to speak. That's what she was saying and referring to. So that everyone pretty much is going to be biracial or of a mixed race. And that is a fear of the white person.
And I think this is your daughter. She said, don't forget about your soon-to-be grandson.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
That's my daughter's name. I do have another grandchild on the way, my grandson, due in April.
Well, congratulations, Adele. So we're still along the thoughts of not being protected by our black men. I'm not sure whether this is just by black men, but when we think about protection, do you think that black women should take responsibility for their protection? And I know that that's in a broad sense, but if we think about physical protection, emotional protection, some people say that black women sometimes put themselves in positions to be unprotected.
Responsible for our own protection. I think we are responsible for advocating for our own protection. On some levels, we are responsible for protecting ourselves, but in certain arenas, there has to be something external or someone external protecting us. But in terms of responsibility, we absolutely should be advocating for our own protection.
Yeah, this is really a hard question because to one extent, like Ms. Valerie said, I do believe that we play a role in it. But then there's just certain arenas that we just don't have access to that I feel like that's where other people need to come alongside and amplify our voices. So in case in point, there's a lot of hashtags, and I hate to say it because sometimes when I view these hashtags, I just don't want it to be viewed as like another trend, So we have like the hashtag say her name or the hashtag protect her. And this generation is all about hashtags, right? As soon as something happens, we'll hashtag our social media to death. Black box our, social medias to death, but then what more are we doing? So yes, I do believe that we do have a role, but I do believe that it does require people alongside of us to recognize that there is a need, and how can we come alongside of our black women and help amplify their voices in just arenas that they haven't touched or don't have access to yet.
So that's the advocating for protection. And so if we flip that question a little bit, do you believe that there are instances, because there are people who say that we are sometimes responsible for being unprotected?
That is kind of a catch-22. And it's a little uncomfortable to even talk about, and I'm talking specifically from being unprotected out in public, out in the street, and being vulnerable and open to potential harm. And I think that what you are alluding to is, are we responsible in terms of how we are dressed, or how we are presenting ourselves, or the places into which we go that are known to be unsafe? Are we responsible? I'm gonna say a little bit yes and a little bit no.
Okay.
Because we should be able to dress however we want to dress. We should be able to go wherever we want to go without the fear of being assaulted sexually, physically, or otherwise. We should be able to. But the reality is that if we do dress a certain way, and if we do go certain places, we are opening ourselves up to the potential of experiencing physical or sexual harm. That doesn't make it right, it doesn't excuse it. So we can talk about how we should be able to navigate, but we also have to deal with the reality of the fact that unless and until everybody has a transformation and everybody's heart is changed and born again, then we are at the whim of those with whom we are around. And we have to be mindful of that in the way that we dress, in the way that we carry ourselves, and in the places into which we go.
Right. So I agree with that. The other thing I would say is that even in those senses of like, if all of those things happen, so I don't have to reiterate exactly what you said, so let's just take all of that, but just make it, again, with the protection thing of like, let's just say if something does happen to us, are we protected in the legal systems where, that we're going to get justice in those senses? So that's the issue sometimes, because it's like, you'll see, if it was my white counterpart, if she was, let's just say, if we were both in somewhere that we weren't supposed to be, if that's the case, am I going to get the same justice as my counterpart did? So I just think like that's, to me, what I see as a Black woman, seeing the Sandra Blands and the Breonna Taylors, and even, there's so many other names. The names are really endless. But, being a Black woman and seeing them and seeing how the justice system handles those. So, like, let's just say we live in a world that's tarnished, right? Yeah. There's going to be things that happen, but our legal system looks at us in a way where we don't need we don't need protection. Like, I mean, when you think about it with Breonna Taylor, here this woman was in her own house, minding her own business, not even, not a care in the world, not knowing that day was going to be her last day. But then we had to wait, I think it was 113 days for them to say that they weren't accounted for and that they got charges for shooting a wall but not shooting a Black woman.
Right.
So, like those type of things. So our justice system is just really like kind of messed up too. If those things happen, if I do get into that situation, will I receive justice?
And the answer is usually probably not.
Right, probably not.
Probably not, because we've seen it happen all too often. And that is, I believe, a large part why women, after being sexually assaulted, choose not to pursue their perpetrators.
Right. And I know that women being sexually assaulted, this is not just in reference to Black people, because obviously white women get sexually assaulted as well. But I'm just concerned about us and how we view, because I know many, myself and many who are in my generation would say something like, well, why was she wearing that?
Yeah.
Why didn't she, what did she think would happen? What did she think was going to happen? And we'd like for you to weigh in as well on, on the live and tell us what you think. And I'm not saying that is appropriate, but we deal with our own internalized misogyny, right?
Yeah.
And that's an example of it. For us to even think that our first line would be, well, why was she dressed like that? Not, why didn't he respect her no matter what?
Yeah. Well, why did she go up to his hotel room at 2:00 in the morning? What did she think was going to happen? When, who knows what the man told her? I'm sure she didn't go there expecting to be assaulted.
And I think the missed thing about that is that it doesn't matter, you know, if we're, you know, to the point of if they get up to the hotel room. So if I go out on a date, I'm married by the way, but I'm saying like if it's but if a woman that's single, you know, is out on a date and they choose to go wherever, it can get to the point where both naked in the bed, right? And she can consent up to a certain point. But at that point, if she decides, stop, I don't want to do it, then that's it.
Right.
It doesn't matter if I'm wearing clothes. It doesn't matter what I'm saying. If I'm saying out of my mouth that that's not what I want, then the other individual should respect that and be able to. So sometimes to me, when I hear the whole idea of, you know, she shouldn't have worn that or she shouldn't this, maybe. But, you know, who are we really, you know, to judge that or, you know, make that thing? And we were speaking earlier about, you know, it's just the heart posture of just being able to know if there is somebody that's around you that maybe you feel that it's not, maybe if you feel like that maybe not be appropriate attire or appropriate behavior. It's just a matter of a heart posture, not talking about that girl behind her back, but being that maybe she don't have a mother figure. Maybe she don't know any better. Maybe to her that outfit makes sense, you know, and in our mind we're just like, why would she wear that? Or, you know, there's so many different variables to it. But I just wanted to say that because I feel like that's a missed thing where people always ask those questions of like, why did this person this or why did this person that? No woman should have, once they walk out of their room, it doesn't matter where they are, they should not have, nobody thinks that, oh, because I wear this, I'm going to be assaulted. Right. Nobody goes out with the expectation of saying, I want to be raped today. You know, that's just like things that I would think that nobody would think about. So I hope that answered the question, but that's just, I just feel like another missed area where people just assumes, you know, those thoughts.
I agree that women don't necessarily leave their home saying, I want to be assaulted today. But if we bring this back around to, say, from a mental health perspective, a lot of women leave their homes looking for something that they haven't been able to experience, and that is attention,
Validation.
looking for validation. They're vulnerable and promiscuous. But no one really talks about the promiscuity starting at the hands of one that they weren't protected by.
Yes, that is.
And so it started when they were a little girl and they were abused, they were sexually abused, and so we only look at them and call them fast-tailed girls, but we don't start with
how did
they get there. They didn't just wake up and say, I want to be a fast-tailed girl.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that, not funny, haha, but funny, peculiar that it tends to always be the female who is asked these questions. Mm-hmm. It tends to always be the female who gets the finger pointed at them. And just like Dr. Danita said, if you have a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old who was acting out sexually, and you say, oh, that's just a little fast girl, well, how did she get that way? Someone has taken advantage of that child. And that's the point that we seem to miss. And now this 5-year-old becomes a 15-year-old, who becomes a 25-year-old, who becomes a 35-year-old. And if those issues that were started at that young age are not addressed and not dealt with, then it's going to lead to that type of behavior. But we don't stop to think and to ask the right questions in terms of, well, why? If she was dressed that way, and if she was acting out provocatively, well, why?
Right.
What is the root of that?
Yeah. And because of the miseducation, because her mother was probably sexually abused too. The mom doesn't know. I think the statistics say that 20% of Black women will be raped over a lifetime, and so that's a pretty high.
I'm surprised it's that low, actually, because I personally know very few women in my generation who have not been sexually assaulted in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I think I keep going back to that topic of post-traumatic slave syndrome because that again, that level of control that men didn't have during the times of slavery, they exert that control over women regularly. Yeah.
Well, they were pretty much forced to exert control over women because they had to birth more babies for the master. So, and along with the over-sexualized woman is the over-sexualized male as well. That was the expectation of them, to lord it over the woman.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? We never want to leave any of our lives, any of our episodes rather, without, coming to a place where we can say, how can we move forward? Where do we go from here? How do we create change?
So, well, one thing that I would say that I did come across is that I believe in September, they just came out with like a Protect Black Women and Girls Act. It wasn't passed, it was just introduced. But what this pretty much is supposed to do is come up with like a, pretty much just like a task force that's gonna go out, come up with all types of data and different things like that that's going to be presented back to kind of see like in areas where Black women are saying that and Black girls are saying that they're struggling. And so whether it be like for housing, for civil rights, for all these things. So I'm glad that I see that those type of things are going into effect. But my only, I would say, concerns would be, is it going to go, is it going to process through? Because that still has to go through the House, that still has to go through the Senate, that still has to go through a president. There's so many factors to that. And how long is that really going to take? So I guess to say like, where are we going to go from here? It's at least good that they have acts like that are in place. It's another good thing, as we just saw recently come by, that we just saw, whatever your sentiments about her, that we do have Vice President-elect Kamala Harris in office to be the first Black Vice President, woman in that office. So, I do see that there are forward things happening.
We just have to make sure that it's not just in writing.
Right.
And that we get a bill stamped and it sits on a desk somewhere. They just spend time collecting data and nothing else changes.
Right. And that's my biggest concern is this really going to process? Is this really going to advance? Are they going to put the proper people that's not just, I mean this in the most humblest way, but the Popeyes lady where they always put the Black woman in front to be the face of the company. But when you look at the company's diversity, their numbers are like 0%. That's there, but the 1% is maybe the face that's out there. But I just would pray that, these type of things that we're seeing that they're putting out there are actually going to advance, that they're not just things to kind of flaunt in our face to quiet us down for a little bit. But again, I also think that we have to hold them accountable. I think we really have to normalize putting Black women in, getting them in office to help change things. Like, I love Shirley Chisholm. She really set the path of that. And in a time when people was just like, is America ready for a Black president? And she literally came back with, were they ready for a Catholic president? Were they ready for, all of these things, So I think that we have to have more of the Kamala Harris's, the Stacey Abrams, the Mayor Bottoms, like those type of women in place. And again, regardless of what your sentiments is, representation is everything. But we have to hold them accountable to do what once they're in place. We also have to hold them accountable to enforce and advance the bigger picture.
Right.
And also, where we go from here, we have to start with awareness. And I think platforms such as this can go a long way towards increasing awareness. I think we have to allow Black women to tell our stories, and for people to listen. And not only listen, but to believe. People like to repeat that quote by Maya Angelou, "The people show you who they are, believe them the first time."
Yeah.
Well, I would like to extend that to Black women. When we tell our stories, believe us the first time, so that we don't have to tell it again and again and again and ad nauseum and repeat it in order to convince people that what we have experienced, we have truly experienced.
Right, right. It's not just as Black women. We're telling the story as Black person and then telling the story as a Black woman. So we're really exhausted.
Exactly.
Yeah. Someone sent this text to me, and the hashtag is "Our Brothers Keep Her." And it says, every single sister should be paired with one brother in her city that she can rely upon for protection, mutual care, and practical help. Each brother would agree to a universal code of conduct with local accountability. Real brothers will.
So I personally agree with that. You know, when we go back to the whole Malcolm X thing, we talked about his quote in the beginning, but I guess to reel it in, one of his biggest taglines was "by any means necessary." By any means necessary, to whatever extent that means, to, you know, whatever extent that we need to protect our community. Even though some people may look at that and say that that may not be necessary, but if you know that your community and the Black women are, you know, being kidnapped or vanishing or those type of things, if you know that that's prevalent in your community, then maybe that does need to go into effect by any means necessary. You know, sometimes we have to put that into effect. Now, I mean, I know at that time Malcolm X was very radical, so his statement was, you know, when he meant by any means necessary, he was like, all the way left. But, you know, in this content, you know, it is by any means necessary. So it's by the protesting, by the, you know, having these brothers that protect, even if it's not like necessarily being paired, but I mean, if you know that there's, let's just say, a single mom that is a nurse that's coming home at a certain time or whatever, and you know that that's her routine. If there's men on the block, there's no reason why she should go unnoticed or unprotected, or realize that, like, if maybe she's been gone for 3 days and people are like, oh, well, I mean, I know she was there, but I don't, you know, like those type of things. I just feel like that could be another instance of what that is saying, that you just have to protect beyond just, sometimes I feel like Black men sometimes just protects their own. But we have to realize, as a community, we are our own.
I feel like we've lost that, that community sense. And I think when we were younger, when I was younger, when Valerie was younger, I think there was more community, and you know, anyone could come out. You know, during those days, they could come out, they could say anything to us and to other people's children, and you know, and the mom would say, did Miss Valerie say that you couldn't? But we've lost that community because this generation doesn't allow anyone to say anything to their woman, their man, their child. It's not that family feeling anymore. And so that's what we need to bring back, where we feel that it's safe to be family and to be community, and that I can say something to your wife in a way of, are you okay, without you feeling like you saying something about, you know?
Yeah, there's that fear factor that we act sometimes as if we are fearful of each other, rather than having a mindset of wanting to protect one another and looking at each person in the community and saying, okay, well, what's going on with them? How can I be of assistance? How can I help? When you were just talking about knowing who's coming home late at night, is there going to be someone to walk that woman from the train station or from the bus stop? And years ago, you know, something like that would happen.
Right.
There was always a couple of people sitting in the window at some point in time during the day or the evening, watching out for someone else in the community. But we have lost that, in large parts of fear.
And I think also the fear comes from because we only see in the media that our people are out to harm us.
Yes.
To harm us as well, you know. So we don't initially think, well, this person is coming to help me. Our thoughts are, we've internalized it, you know, a lot of it, our thoughts are this person is out to harm me. This is all that we see, in the media.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just like Latoya said a moment ago, when there are more of us in certain arenas where we can make a difference, and media is one of them, because they're responsible for the ways in which we are portrayed. And it's unfortunate that there are some people in other countries, that's all they know about Black people. Is what they see depicted on television, and most of the time, it's not good.
But I think the only way in media that we can create that change is if we own the station, right?
Yeah.
Because we may be in media, but we're still under the direction of the owner of the network, right? And so we say what they tell us to say.
Or turning down roles that you know that is not, that's not conducive to what you are,
Yes.
or what you what your lifestyle really is. Like sometimes I feel like a lot of these roles that represent us in the wrong way, a lot of these actresses and actors, they're just looking for a job and a check, so they'll like say whatever. So you have to be okay, to turn those. Because again, like I said, representation is everything. So like you said, there's people in other countries that look at, the favorite Love and Hip Hop and all those, and they look at the Black woman, and that's how they deceive us. And they're just like, oh, so we're having this conversation here. They'll look at that and like, oh, so now she want to be protected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I agree. Awareness, education, advocacy, all of those are absolutely necessary for us to be able to move forward. But the question is always, will we? We can have all of these great talks. I remember when I was taking a class in social justice and advocacy, I can't remember who the author of the book was, the textbook was, but he said just do 5%. You don't have to just do 5% more than you have done, and that's not a whole lot, but just put your mind to doing something that would move forward and is beyond your everyday routine, just 5%. And so if you can, those of you who are watching us, I always end with, sitting and thinking and reflecting. We're sitting and thinking and reflecting about this particular topic, and thinking about the ways that we have internalized a lot of what we shared on tonight. So that in and of itself can be a 5% change, just changing your mindset. Because if you change your mindset first, then what will follow is a different behavior, and you'll be more inclined to do something different. And so we just ask, whatever lane you find yourself in, if you are part of the legal community, then do 5% more, for your people. If you're part of the health community, do 5% more. As a mental health therapist, doing this is my more, because I never really thought that I would, first I never thought that I would be doing these episodes, but to do the episode on racial issues, and I thought, well, as a mental health therapist, I'm just going to consistently talk about anxiety, depression, and but this is helping, because many women are traumatized by this unprotected state that they live in on a daily basis. And so bringing this education and imploring people to take the next step to make a difference, I believe is making a difference. Yeah. So I just want to thank you for being my guest on this evening, and I absolutely enjoyed our time together. You all have a good night.